Hey everyone, Duan here. So in today's video, I wanted to address a question that a lot of parents ask their kids before they go and join Peace Corps. And that question is Peace Corps safe? And so I imagine a lot of these parents, they're thinking about crime, including robberies, sexual assault. They're thinking about, is my kid going somewhere where terrorists live? They're thinking about diseases and um, nutrition, even housing problems, and these are all legitimate concerns. These are questions that you should have been asking yourself, and you should have been asking your PC director of the country that you've chosen to go to. You should have also been looking up stats, seeing what other volunteers have gone through. And so in this video, I want to talk about some of the things that happened to me. I also want to share some stories from other Peace Corps Guinean volunteers, and I want to be as real as I can, um, and just kind of help you make a decision based on that. First of all, I would say that Guinea is a pretty safe country in terms of if you're expecting there to be high levels of crime or anything like that. No, there's not. Uh, Guineans, in my experience, don't really steal. Um, and I think part of it is because, when you're in the village or even in some of the major cities, people know each other very intimately. They've grown up in the same communities. They're cousins back and forth multiple times, and people don't have a lot to steal. There's no People don't have nice TVs. They don't have super nice watches or hordes of cash that they hide in their homes. So and and since they're family, like, people are normally supposed to give money to each other anyways, or give gifts to each other anyways. So it's not like you couldn't just ask for some things. Uh, it's so I just don't think that Ghanaians would steal from each other, and they don't steal from Peace Corps volunteers really either. During my 2 years there, the only thing that I had stolen was a compost bucket, and it was a nicer, thicker bucket, maybe a foot and a half tall, and half as wide. And I was filling it up with compost because I wanted to do something for my garden. And someone took it with the compost in it. I don't know who did it. You have to remember, my house was the center of the market, so every Sunday I had a couple thousand people walk by my house. It literally could have been anyone, in the morning or at night. I really don't know. No one saw, but I think they would have stopped it if people had known what was going on. The second thing I had stolen was, I had sunflowers. I had grown sunflowers and they were blooming, and someone cut off one of the flowers out of like the 30 flowers that I had. Again, something really inconsequential. It just made me salty. I had like a sunflower that didn't have a flower on it. I wish they'd just asked, because then I would have given it to them. On the more serious side, I had asked a carpenter, to build me some furniture, and he didn't. He basically stole my money to use for his own drinking habits and other stuff. I couldn't get him arrested because my boss said that that would have been a bad image for Peace Corps, and I deeply disagreed with that. I still disagree with it. He just said, like, I didn't want to feed a stereotype of a white person punishing African. Again, something I disagree with. My police commissioner and my principal, however, made the guy still build the stuff for me. It was just very late and still pretty bad quality, but I got some of my money back that way. Um, Other volunteers, they did report. I think another volunteer had a compost, something like compost related, larger than a bucket though, maybe like a giant box stolen. Um, a lot of us put our flip flops outside just because when it was rainy and muddy, we didn't want to be walking into our house with muddy flip flops. We just left them outside. And I know a few volunteers probably had their flip flops stolen. Um, that's could easily be explained if you're, like, my house was near. I think I had a pair of flip flops stolen, but I was getting new ones like every few weeks. They don't last long. But I live close to a bar, and I knew, like, people might walk by my house, and there's sometimes they're just out there, like, if they're drunk. Like, would imagine if you're an American, a drunk person sees a pair of shoes on the sidewalk, he's gonna probably pick them up too. Again, nothing too serious. Um, I think some of the other volunteers, in terms of small crimes like that, yeah, nothing bad at all. Sometimes people would try to raise prices against us, which I guess if you want to call as theft, but I went around that by just having my students get things for me from the market. I'd go give them money and they'd have them go buy things for me, and I'd give them back a little change when they came back. Uh, let's go to harassment. So for me, I lived 50 yards away from a bar, and it wasn't uncommon for um, drunk guys just to walk by my house and like sing to me and get really close to my window, like on my patio, basically. Again, nothing. I never felt unsafe. I never felt like if my door was open, they would come in and attack me. I just felt really fucking annoyed, and that was the extent of what they would do. They were just there to annoy me. I know some of the female volunteers unfortunately did have guys that wanted to get more friendly with them. They just like kept coming up. One volunteer said a guy kept coming up to her hut and just like kept wanting to talk to her, saying, "Hey, can we just talk? Can we just talk?" And no, you don't. She didn't want to be doing that at night. She don't want a guy coming into her place at night. And the village wasn't doing anything, so Peace Corps actually transferred her to another site. A lot of the female volunteers never walked alone at night. They usually had either other ladies with them or just friends. And it's easy to have friends who will just walk you home. They'll do it casually. I usually had a friend that walked me home, even though I lived like 100 yards away from where I hung out. They just like want to walk you home. That's that's fine, but I know like some of the female volunteers, like they just didn't go out at night at all just to avoid those problems. One of the volunteers that lived in a major city, I know she went to clubs or bars rather, and she always had company to go there and back, or she'd just déplace au taxi, and I don't think she had too many serious issues. In terms of assault, so for me, I did have, Guineans, they can be very touchy, and Americans might not like being touched so much, and so that can just be a little bothersome. For me, the people that probably got a little too close in touching me they were actually mentally handicapped. So it was never that I I mean, yeah, I felt uncomfortable being touched, and especially since they're usually unwashed, a lot of times unwashed rather. But I wasn't really angry or, I mean, what can you do, right? Every village will have a few mentally handicapped people who who might not understand your space so much, and they'll do the same thing to everyone else. But for an American who might be new to the scene, it might the first time it happens, you might whoa, 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 you're getting too close. You just have to understand who's around you and um, try and just adapt to it. There, I never got into like a violent confrontation with anyone, just arguments, but they were pretty sane arguments. Um, I did see Guineans get into an argument, and Guineans love to throw rocks at each other. The Guineans don't throw punches, they don't, but they will throw rocks. And there was a kid who died in my village, not too far away from my house, actually. Uh, he was walking back from the bar, and some guy thought he was a guy that his girlfriend was cheating on him with, so he threw a rock and killed him. Um, it was like something like that, and that was pretty bad. They caught the kid though; he got put in jail, the murderer. Um, there was, I think I told this before, but one of my fellow trainees, she got grabbed by a guy who came up behind her and grabbed her. It was over very quickly, and there was another female volunteer next to her. I don't know much about the guy, but he just grabbed her, and it was completely inappropriate, and she felt uh, that it was like assault. But when she called her dad was like, that's the same thing that could happen in New York City. Um, there was at least one female volunteer who was raped, and I think this was around the time there were about 100 volunteers in the country, and this was one that said she had gone out with a guy friend, and he took her to meet his friends. They went back to another friend's place, and he left her with that other guy, and that guy raped her. She she um, she left. She was able to leave and went to the police and got a lawyer and arrested that guy. I don't know much else about that. It was kept confidential. She actually returned to her site. I don't even know which volunteer it was. I have no idea. But she went back to her site and I think had like at least a year left in her service. Um, hmm. Yeah, other than that, like there's Guineans love to say hello to people on the phone, and for Americans, like we're not used to that. So Guineans might call you constantly, just saying, "Hey, just want to say hi, just want to say hi." You might consider that harassment. So that's it for safety on the criminal side of things. Let's talk about safety in terms of what else could cause you harm as a volunteer. And I want to perhaps relate a few stories to you, namely how I almost died as a volunteer. So, number one, there was a wedding ceremony taking place at my first house as a Peace Corps volunteer, and a lot of food was being cooked in mass, tons and tons and tons. And this is a problem with food that's been cooked in like huge bowls or pots. You're not really sure if it's actually cooked well enough or how long it was in transit before it got to you. But it was a celebration. It was free meat, and so I ate it. About 10 hours later, I'm in my bedroom. There's a storm outside, lots of lightning, lots of thunder, lots of wind, and it's just like blowing into my room, and um, I'm feeling really sick, really hurt. I try and get up, and I can't get up. I can't get up out of my own bed, and like I'm feeling around, like my stomach is hurting a lot, and my stomach has basically expanded, and I feel like a pregnant person. I actually looked like I was pregnant. Like again, remember I was like 125 pounds, one of the lowest weights I've ever had in my life, and so I'm at 125 pounds, and with this giant basketball of a stomach. I finally roll out of bed. I try to relieve myself. Nothing comes out, and I'm just feeling more and more pain. I try to call my doctor. I couldn't. I had no reception. It was just I would sometimes go weeks without reception, and when there's a storm like that, you'll never be able to call anyone. And uh, I just I put out my journal even and thought about like writing some words, like my last words, because that's how much pain I was in, and that's like it was just really obliterating me. Um, Luckily, I was able to relieve myself. I think both ways really, and the next day, I got some medicine from my village doctor, and it was for amoebas. And mine, well, by the time I was able to take it, like my swelling had gone down, but my entire stomach area, like from my lower chest down my abs, was bruised. And basically, what was happening was these amoebas were eating up inside me as like a side product. They're making gas, and so your stomach's expanding, and like your intestines are expanding. And so I was just filling up with gas that I couldn't get out, and it was risking causing like a lot of damage to me. So that was probably the first time I almost died. It wouldn't be the only time I got amoebas. I actually got amoebas a second time, but recognized it beforehand and took the same medicine, and so I didn't feel so bad. Another time, this was towards the end of my service, and I wasn't getting sick anymore in my second year. I was pretty well adapted, but I um, I was taking a shower, and my shower was outside, and so I'm walking back from my shower with my flashlight and just a towel. That's all I've got. And I close my patio door behind me, and I hear this banging sound. Middle of the night, I can't see anything, so I was shining my flashlight, and maybe 10, 15 feet away from me, slithering out of my house, is probably a 5 foot long mamba. And the banging sound was it rearing up and hitting my door. So if you don't know much about mambas, a mamba can bite you faster than you can blink, and you have 15 minutes to get to antidote. And if you don't get the antidote within 15 minutes, you will be dead within 30 minutes. And to be honest, we actually even asked our Peace Corps doctor what would happen if we got bit by a snake, and she said, sit down, call your parents, and say goodbye, because you're not getting help. And so that was a feeling I had in that brief instant where I am, less than 15 feet away from one of the most dangerous snakes in the world, with a flashlight and a towel. And I thought that was it. Luckily for me, the snake slithered off and off my patio, and I was able to go inside with a flashlight, checked every crevice and corner, closed up all my doors, put mats everywhere where I thought I might have slithered in. And I survived that one. But it was pretty scary, definitely. I think it had just gone in. It was probably looking for mice. Mamas don't actively seek out people to hunt. Other times where I definitely felt unsafe and probably shouldn't even be around was just your taxis might suddenly lose power. If you notice, almost all of Peace Corps' deaths are automobile accidents, and that's not a mystery. They're using taxis that are very old. And sometimes you'll be going down a hill and the taximan might turn off the engine just to save power for some strange reason. And obviously if you pick up too much speed, your brakes fail. There's another cliff or a river. Things can get dangerous really quickly. Luckily that never happened to me, but I did have a few taxis where I thought we were going to go over a cliff. We were going to hit another taxi. They're just sometimes going so fast, sometimes too slow, not paying attention. The worst time was I was coming back from Zirikori, and our wheel fell off. And luckily there was no traffic. It wasn't a cliff. It wasn't downhill or uphill. We couldn't go anywhere once the wheel came off. The car was already going slow for potholes, and so we actually just slid to a stop pretty safely. But in any other time, that could have been really dangerous. And speaking of Zirikori, I actually tried to climb that damn mountain at the base in Zirikori, and ended up going really close to the top, and I stepped on a red viper. And a red viper, apparently, again, it was very venomous. That's what our tour guide said. And my boots were on it. It actually bit into my boots. Our tour guide killed it with a knife once I had stepped on it. But I lost. Yeah, it's a little alarming to be that close to a dangerous snake. Spiders. So there's one time where I was in my living room just doing work. Had my glasses off like usual, and I hear this plop sound through my window, like near my window. I'm thinking, oh great, it's a mouse. I was always having problems with mice getting into my house, trying to get into my bag of rice, doing really annoying things. I look down, and there's something, there's some shadow near my flip flops near the door, and I was like, it looks a little bit bigger than a mouse. I get my flashlight and shine on, and the shadow it was casting was definitely a lot bigger than a mouse. Finally, put on my glasses, and that's when this thing starts moving on its eight legs. I eventually caught it and had my neighbor and my police commissioner come over to witness what I had found. And it was like a 6-inch long tarantula, but with long legs. And my friend called it a word that my police commissioner didn't even know in their language. And they very carefully killed it. He said I was very lucky to be alive because this spider, when it bites, it causes a staph infection. And he was using the French term for staph. And he said it actually kills cows, this spider. And I looked it up. There's no tarantulas in my area. It seemed like another animal that was unknown. But it was a very rare type of spider because, again, my friend called it a word that my police commissioner didn't even know. My police commissioner had never seen a spider like that, and he'd grown up in the same region. And my friend just called it a river spider. Again, something very rare. Um, hmm. So those are really the few times where I got sick or got really close to dangerous things where I could have died. I had walked by a green mamba in the forest one time too. But again, mambas aren't looking to attack you unless you walk right into them, which is a possibility. The 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 most dangerous thing that a volunteer will repeatedly come close to, besides taxis and motos, is ants. There's these ants that they're blind, but they'll send out these patrols of like 200 warrior ants, and you can almost always hear them before they get to you because they're constantly clicking their pincers like shh, and it just gets louder and louder, and you can walk right over them and they won't do anything. But if you blow on them or if they sense you, they spread out. And these things, once they bite you, it's a bitch to get off. They are very large, very strong, and when they move colonies, it'll be like a mile long of warrior ants defending the workers as they move dirt and queens and what have you. They will, the warrior ants will never come into your house. Um, that's not usually how they're programmed. But at the same time, you should always be cautious when you're walking around because they've got trails all over the forest. Um, and if they swarm you, you will be in pain. I know there's stories of these ants killing kids, just basically suffocating them. If they get into a chicken roost, they can kill the chickens and skin them by sunup. They move very efficiently again, but they'll never come into your house. The workers will come looking for food, and you can actually leave your food on the ground, and by morning it'll be gone because they've taken it away. Yeah, they were pretty. They weren't too fun because like they'd walk through my garden. They marched through my garden a lot, and I'd have to stop working while they marched through. Um, on a funnier side for dangerous things, there's a lot of mango trees and a lot of jackfruit trees in Guinea. So jackfruit is the world's largest fruit, I believe, and Guinea gets really windy from the storms. And when both fruits are in season, you're just getting rained on by mangoes and jackfruit. And well, there's not too many jackfruit trees actually. There was only one in my village, but it was my house. But if these things fall on you, you're dead. And if you get 20 mangoes to fall on you in a single second, then you're going to be hurting too. That's another dangerous thing. Um, hmm. What did other volunteers have? A lot of volunteers had medical problems, nutrition problems. One volunteer had it was like either liver failure or kidney failure onset of those symptoms, and he had to be uh, he had an early termination of service, medically induced. Another volunteer had stomach ulcer problems, um, skin rashes just from the heat can be awful, and also people are allergic to mangoes that they don't realize. Uh, One volunteer got burned on a moto because he rode a moto, and once he confirmed that with Peace Corps, he was fired. Um, there, I know several Peace Corps volunteers died. I think around year 2004, like two volunteers died in a single car accident. I'd like to say Guinea drivers have gotten better over the years. You know, just better training, better regulations. There's more checkpoints that they have to look out for. And, you know, gendarmes are stopping them now. Um, but yeah, I'd say Guinea is about as safe as you would expect from a developing country. I would say crime was very low. Um, I Peace Corps does a pretty good job of telling you what to expect from the people, what could be dangerous, what should be safe, and you'll be an adult, able to make those decisions based on your environment. Uh, I never felt physically threatened, besides gendarme waving their guns around without even knowing if the safety was on. That's about it. Um, yeah, and those sicknesses and health issues, those are issues that are pretty common to most volunteers in developing countries. You will have a health kit that has all the medicine that you need, and do check to make sure that medicine isn't expired, because that happened to a few of us where we're like, oh, this medicine expired a long time ago, or worse, the condoms expired a long time ago too. Um, so there's issues like that. But overall, I would say Peace Corps is safe, and there are a lot of ways to make it safer. You know, constant communication with your friends, asking people to walk you home, uh, making sure that you always lock your stuff up. Make sure you don't have any holes in your house. You don't want snakes coming in or rats coming in, and rats can get pretty big too. Um, you're if you're cooking most of your own food, or if you did like me, I paid someone to cook my own food. Like it's always going to be hot, so it'll be sanitized. Um, yeah, again, I'd say probably the most dangerous thing in Guinea is the automobiles, which is again what kills most volunteers. I think for a lot of times I'd had like a handkerchief over my mouth just because some of the cars don't have filters, so it's just bad air coming into you. But yeah, I think that's a good spot. This is a pretty long video. I talked about, you know, crime, safety, some of the things that killed me, um, or almost killed me. Sorry, I'm still alive, right? Yeah, if you have any questions, just shoot them over and ask. Take care, guys.